Today I'm going to be discussing the issues of college debt and the effects that it has had on our nation as a whole. I am pulling information from the resources I've previously collected to work on my previous writing projects, and I've compiled them all into this presentation. To begin, I want to give a brief history of student loans, mainly having to do with the numbers of it. In my first writing project, where we interviewed people, I interviewed my grandfather, and one of the questions I asked him was, what was your tuition like when you went into college? Now, he went to Ashland University, and he said, in a way that I don't think you could say any better, was he doesn't even remember what his tuition was because he paid it off forever ago because it wasn't even that big of a problem back then. And I think that should raise more awareness to this than anything, because today that's all young adults can think about, because they know they're going to have to deal with this for the rest of our lives. Some numbers from the tuition jump from a little more recent years. From 2004, the average tuition for students was $18,550. In just a mere 10 years, it has jumped 57%, $28,950 average. And now we're in the year 2018, so you can only imagine how much it's raised since then. Doing this, it's going to create a bubble that, if any of you are familiar with, to the 2008 mortgage crisis. If you aren't familiar with what that is, basically, imagine a very great loan. So the best loan you can have, a AA loan is what they're called. And basically what that's made up of is a bunch of not as great loans that people aren't exactly paying off. And your loan is made up of that promised money. So when people don't pay it back, it's going to keep removing a piece of it out until that whole system crumbles, and that's what your bubble is. This is similar to the student loans because the loans are so high at this point in time that when we are promising to pay this off, the career we go into usually isn't going to have as high of a pay to be able to balance having a new home, starting a family, travel, all the different factors that go into living with college debt. Financial aid was supposed to be a way to counter this by the people that don't have the resources to be able to pay their college debt because they come from a poor family. You have to apply to this financial aid. Basically, this financial aid is going to ask you questions about your lifestyle and your home life, such as, what are your parents' combined income? To me, this is not a question that should be asked or should be a factor in financial aid, mostly because people aren't going to have their family that's going to pay for them for their college, and that's going to be up to them. So, by asking about their parents, it's a pointless question, and that's a big factor in financial aid. Mostly because they're like, well, their parents will be able to help them with their student loans. We're not going to give them either a significant amount of financial aid or financial aid at all. Another factor they look at are your ACT test scores, which I also do not think should be a factor that should be used as heavily as it is. I think this because the fact that due to a leading up stress of how big of a deal the ACT has become, people can have mental breaks during this test or mental difficulties that create problems during the test that make you not perform as what you normally would. I think this should be more heavily weighted on your grades throughout your high school career that make a more reliable source of how your general ability ability to learn and to grow as a student from the beginning of high school to the end of high school. And that way, you can see that all 4 years they have worked hard, they have learned and grown, and that is why I think that financial aid should be based off of that more. High debt, and the massively high debt that it is, means no one's going to really enroll at this point, because now there are jobs that are offering paying at a way higher starting rate than what anyone would that has a degree, and their job that they're going to go into. These jobs that don't require the degree are going to have a way higher starting rate and are going to create people that feel like getting a degree is pointless. This is going to lead to an uneducated generation, which is going to further to another generation of uneducated and another, until college is basically irrelevant and your education stops after high school. I find that the further you look into this, you're going to realize that the jobs with degrees are going to become less competitive, which means when you want to have a surgery, your surgeon might not be the best surgeon that there could have been, because the competition in that field has gone down drastically. And you'll have about 100 truck drivers that are competing for the same job because it doesn't require the degree. But your business owners, your surgeons, dentists, all of them, the field is going to become less competitive, which is going to lead to less innovation, less education, less wealth as an economy, and it's going to lead to us falling behind in the world. Now, from 2010 to 2012, we have borrowed a exponentially massive amount of money. The debt ceiling being raised is a huge catastrophic thing that can happen to our nation. Just from 2010 to 2012, the amount borrowed went from $100 billion to $1 trillion. Well, to break it down, the average student debt is $23,300, and this survey interviewed 37 million Americans. Of those, 39% of them are paying off their student loans currently. 14% are delinquent on paying these off, which means that they're not actually paying them off currently, and they either don't have enough because of the degree that they're going into, or they just are deciding not to pay them. 47% are still adding to their debt, which means most likely they're still in school and they're still learning and they're still getting their degrees. This also goes back to the creating a bubble, because that 14% that's delinquent, those are going to be loans that are being put up as very great loans, but that 14% are the little loans underneath that are being taken away and crumbling the entire system. This is going to be an awful, horrific event for our economy when it happens, because even though the 2008 mortgage crisis was for homes and people would lose their homes, this would take away jobs. Tons of jobs for colleges, just professors, kids that are this 47% that are adding to their debt because they're still going to school. Their schools could close. There's many different things that could happen that would completely ruin this nation's education system and economy. These high tuition fees, all this stuff is making it so people are like, if we're going to have to get a degree, we're going to go to a degree that's going to pay well, even though we hate doing it, which is going to lead to a moral decline in our nation. People are choosing to enroll in what they want because it costs too much to do the thing they love to do. A moral decline plus an economic and educational decline are the two things we're facing, two options we're facing right now. Out of all this, there's no real positive outcome that could come from this. A moral decline means you're going to walk around people who have a ton of money maybe, but they hate going to work every single day. And people who aren't passionate about their careers, passionate about their jobs, they're not going to have the inclination to keep going and keep going past what they should do, which is the leading thing to innovation. A job should be what you're passionate about. That's what leads people to stay late and to do extra, to do more, so they can grow that field, that education. It leads to medical greatness. Everything that is going to go further and further our nation comes from people being passionate about their jobs. So without it, a moral decline also means decline in innovation as well. So what can we do about it? Well, I think a great thing that we can do is we need to establish better policies and better financial education classes. What I mean by establish better policies is that going back to the people that are the amount borrowed, the 1 billion to 100 trillion, the debt ceiling being raised, I think that it's been introduced in Congress. What can happen is we're going to remove the provision that says when we file bankruptcy, our college loans stay and our student debt stays. They want to remove that provision to make it so our college debt is also erased with it. I think this will help people get back on their feet and keep their degrees, so they'll be able to pay off more and keep our economy flowing the way it should be. I think better financial education classes is also a fantastic thing to implement in our high schools, or maybe a mandatory class in college that's free, and it teaches students like in hardcore policies and ways to budget their student loans, how to finance their student loans, how to do all of that in greater detail. I personally took a 9-week course in high school on how financial literacy works and the economy works, and the teacher the entire time kept talking about we can only go into the absolute basics of all of this. We have pretty much zero time to actually go over it and to learn in depth. If you want to do that, you have to pay for it in college if that's what something you're serious about. I think this is a terrible idea to have to charge people to pay for it because, one, no one really wants to learn about it, and so they're not going to pay for it, and two, we can just implement it into a high school for free because it's already a requirement, but make it a full year course instead of just a 9-week, and that way we can go in depth on each thing, learn how to budget, learn how to finance our student loans, and in depth of everything, how the economy works, why we should do this, why we should do that, all of it. Another possible fix is provide, alrighty. That is all of my findings that I have for this course and through the writing projects I have done throughout the entire semester. And I found that what we need to do as a nation is come together more and put our voices out there about how this is actually ruining our young adults' lives, and our generations are becoming less educated, morally declined because of the stress of all these tests that we have to take and how we're going to pay this off in the future. I think that all of these problems that we have can be easily fixed with just a few adjustments to payment and how much students should have to pay. For example, I think that when we go apply to a college, it should not be a set rate for that college, but I think they should look at the degree that you're going to obtain, and you can take that, and the college will see how much that field is going to pay pertaining to your degree, and make your tuition more based on that. Then, so when you're able to start a family and have a home, travel, groceries, all of that, that'll be able to fit in, so it doesn't take over everything else in your budget. And that would lead to more people doing what they're passionate about, which means more innovation to every part of the world, every part of every field. You'd see more medical leaps and jumps to greater things. You'd see more people happy wherever you look. College debt has just been looked at something, well, people are going to get over it, or well, people are going to learn how to deal with this. But it affects so much of everyday life that you just don't notice. I feel that today these problems can be fixed. These problems are way bigger than people make them to be. And I feel we need to bring attention to it. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation and for hearing me talk about all the problems that we have.